Hello and welcome back to Perspectives. On today's show, we look at how the Sikh community has been at the vanguard of a new bill in the United States designed to protect Gurdwaras against outside threats, whether from the state or indeed Hindutva mischief. Elon Musk seems to have ruffled a few feathers as he's accused of aiding the independence movement in Manipur. But is all quite as it seems. And in Canada, a Liberal candidate faces demands to withdraw from the election race after shocking past anti-Sikh posts surface on social media. And in a bizarre incident, a Canadian is arrested on live TV in Sierra Leone. Well, all this and more on today's show. But joining me as always for Perspectives is our very own correspondent in Canada, James Cousineau. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Angus, and good morning to our viewers out there. Thanks for tuning in for another episode of Perspectives, the last one of this week, and we'll let you go for a long weekend. But while you're out there enjoying your weekend, make sure to like, follow, and share, and make sure that you invite your friends along for the journey next week.
Indeed, and James and I together will be bringing you our perspectives on the daily news affecting the Sikh community across the world. And of course, as usual, we will be taking a look at loads of great comments which have been filling up below the video. So thank you so much, as always, for those. Right, James, let's get the show on the road. What are you going to start us off with this morning?
Well, an influencer by the name of Hawa Hunt is a dual citizen of Canada and Sierra Leone. Now, she had in the past put up basically a post on Twitter or one of the social media feeds, and it spoke ill of Sierra Leone. And of course, the government kept track of that, and now she's facing the consequences of those actions. Now, this really draws a lot of comparisons to what you see in India, when people are talking negatively about Modi and about the BJP, and especially when people are talking about the Khalistan movement. So I thought that it was very interesting to look at this from the aspect or the impact of another country, and that, of course, as I said, was Sierra Leone. Now, this young lady is behind bars, and she is a dual citizen of Canada and the US, and she lives in Calgary. And she went back to take part in a reality television show. And when she was arrested, it was actually while they were filming. They didn't catch her at the airport as she arrived. They waited for maximum embarrassment and humiliation by doing it on the TV show so that it was actually recorded. And she was making comments and negative comments about the First Lady of Sierra Leone and her husband, the president. And this came back to bite her. Now, within days of her making those comments, her mother did a public appearance online, and basically it was an apology to the First Lady and the President for any embarrassment that was caused by this comment that was made some time back. However, it was not enough to get her out of prison, and she's been there now for almost a month, and the news is just finally getting to the mainstream here in Canada. So it's very interesting about how that played out. Now, she has also spoken out and said that she has been subjected to beatings and other physical violence from the guards, not just other inmates, but the guards themselves. And it is just one of the normal ways that they handle this situation in Sierra Leone. And that is not saying that it is appropriate or acceptable, but this is how it is handled. And again, it's for simply saying some things that put a dark cloud or, a negative light on the president and first lady. It wasn't horrendous, but it was still negativity, and that is not allowed. And so what they're doing now with her behind closed doors, besides the physical violence, we don't know, but we hope that, the Canadian government can negotiate to get her back to Canada soon. And they are watching this story very closely. The Foreign Affairs Department and the representatives in the region are also involved to try to get her freedom. Now, she faces the charges of transmitting insulting messages via a computer system, and that's under their Cybersecurity and Crime Act. And Amnesty International has also been very closely following this story and speaking out publicly in the media. And with that said, there was also another person arrested, and that was actually a journalist. And she had been reporting on the situation separate from this case, but just the overall condition in Sierra Leone, and spoke out in a negative way, calling them out for the different human rights abuses and other abuses going on there. And she was still in the country, so they arrested and detained her. However, they did release her after several days for the simple fact that I think there's a lot more pressure when it comes to arresting journalists in Sierra Leone still, as opposed to just a dual citizen. So again, every arrest is serious, every accusation is serious, but at the same time, it is just for expressing that freedom of communication, of expressing yourself, the freedom of speech. And that is where people who grow up in Canada or the US or the UK, we really take that for granted. And sometimes they don't realize, especially the younger crowd in these days of social media, don't realize the ramifications of those actions. When they speak out against world leaders, it could be exactly what happened here, where she decides to go and be a part of this reality TV show. And guess what? They come knocking, and she is going to pay for her crime of simply speaking out. She does say that she's apologetic and remorseful, but at the same time, I mean, wouldn't you also be, apologetic and remorseful if you were subjected to the prison conditions there, as well as the violence that she's being subjected to? So we'll have to keep an eye on this and see if she is released. The one bright side is that there's not a lot of tension between our politics and geopolitical system in Canada and Sierra Leone. It is, of course, it's not in a great position, but again, it's not in a negative position where we are seeing things such as in India with the calling out of the, transnational repression, the foreign interference, and so forth. So again, we'll have to watch how that works. But there have been protests against Sierra Leone and other countries in relation to how they treat people, how they treat their citizens, and of course with the transnational repression by several countries as well. So with that, Angus, it's just one of those stories that I thought paralleled what we see a lot in India when it comes to silencing media, when it comes to silencing citizens or even foreign nationals.
Yes, I think, of course, there's an immediate parallel to a lot of the stories that we talk about in India, and Sikhs who are arrested and detained arbitrarily in India, essentially for speaking out either against the ruling elite or indeed, of course, being pro-Khalistan. Now, interestingly, one thing I had to quickly look up actually just then as you were speaking, Sierra Leone in the World Free Press Index sits at 64th position out of about 180 countries. So, about a third of the way down, and yet we see something like this happening. Where does India sit in that same World Free Press Index? 159th, near the bottom. So, yeah, I mean, we're talking here in the press about a lady who's been arrested for speaking out against the regime, against the government in a country that's 64th position. Now imagine then scale that down to India, which is 159th. And that puts into context just how dangerous India is to be a citizen who happens to not agree with the government. If you happen to be a critic or stand in opposition to the BJP or indeed the RSS, then, look how dangerous or precarious your position is. And I think this highlights, it sits in contrast. This is how bad is it in Sierra Leone. And how often, and this really points out a little bit of hypocrisy in the West, is, how often do we point out, we look at West African countries like Sierra Leone and say, tin pot dictators, these banana republics, we'll quite often say, in social media or in the press, even the mainstream media will refer to these West African countries with a pretty patronizing perspective. And we point to sort of things like this. Well, look what happens in Sierra Leone. They go and arrest a woman on live TV. Ha ha ha! Call that freedom. That's what life is like in these tin pot countries. Well, actually, in reality, Sierra Leone sits a heck of a lot better than India. Why then are we not pointing out the same to India? Why instead are we shaking the hand of Narendra Modi? Why are we fating India's Prime Minister, this country that is 3 times worse in the Free Press Index in terms of a free press, and it has a human rights track record that actually pales Sierra Leone in comparison. Sierra Leone certainly had its troubles. It certainly had its internal struggles, strifes, wars, civil wars, etc. We talk about those a lot. Quite often they reach the press. Its historic militant past. How often does the Western mainstream media report about the genocides that occurred in 1984 and the mass murder of a whole population, the young Sikh generation in the Punjab across the 1980s and 1990s? I don't remember ever seeing it reported in the mainstream press over the last few decades. Right. It's never referred to. We turn a blind eye to India. Why does the West turn a blind eye to India? Probably because it's got a population of 1.4 billion and therefore is a massive potential commercial market. It's all about dollars, James. That's what it's all about. Sierra Leone has probably a drop in the ocean of oil, which means, well, it could potentially be of interest, but it doesn't really matter. I mean, at the end of the day, who cares about West Africa? But yeah, India, we care about India. We want to stay friends with India, firstly for the geopolitical perspective that we talk about regularly with China on its doorstep. But more importantly, it's a massive commercial market. So yeah, we're all happy to brush under the carpet the disgusting outrage of the ignorance of democratic principles of the rule of law. And immediately, of course, we talk about Jaggi, Amritpal Singh and the many others who are just sitting in prison indefinitely, effectively permanently, without charge, without conviction, for years on end in jail cells in India. Jaggi's a British citizen. What's the British government doing about it? I bet the Canadian government does a lot more about this lady in Sierra Leone than the British government is doing about Jaggi. That's the difference, James. It's all about dollars. It's what it really comes down to.
Absolutely. And I think that there's also the other difference is that in Sierra Leone, they're not dealing with a potential, breakup or balkanization of the region. And India really wants to make sure that they publicly really downplayed their involvement in this activity to increase trade, while at the same time making sure that the diaspora itself is well aware as to who's behind these actions, unofficially, of course. But they want the diaspora to know who's behind these activities because they want to keep them silenced. They want to try to repress them. They want to try to reduce the public outcry against Modi, against the BJP. And that's why it is so important that if you are in the Los Angeles area, that you get out next month and make your voice heard in the referendum. And again, it's coming up in March, so make sure that you mark your calendar, get out there and place your vote. I've seen some activity on social media where they are putting up the signage and they are getting excited down there, Angus, to make things happen. But on that note, let's take a look at what's happening in Ontario when it comes to working with India and speaking about suppressing voices of the Khalistan movement and of Sikhs in general. Now, a Liberal candidate, as many people know, Doug Ford, has called a snap election for the provincial premiership and the MLAs there. So that election is coming up quickly. We don't spend a lot of time on the campaigning part of elections in Canada. So it happens pretty quick. And this one came about even quicker because it wasn't your normal scheduled election. It was called early. And again, that has to do with or allegedly has to do with the current condition of the threat of tariffs by the U.S., and the other threats of annexation by Trump and, just the whole geopolitical surface that he wants to make sure that he has a clear mandate going forward. And of course, with that said, he feels that right now is his best chance to win that mandate and to win back his office for another term. That said, of course, there is a Liberal candidate in Ontario, and he has been called out for his support of the India government, for his calling out and supporting the extrajudicial killing of Hardeep Singh Nijjar in British Columbia, among other things. And we'll go through that because it is very much not in line with Canadian values. It's very much not in line with representing a very diverse community. And it sure is not in line with the Canadian overall attitude and value system. Now, Mr. Bansal, who is, as I said, a Liberal candidate, has been vetted by the Liberal Party, and we don't understand how he could have been with this very public and previously publicized statements that he's made and actions that he has taken part in. Now, he's gone on and said that his comments are just one-offs, the group is called and said that his comments are not just a one-off. There are at least 3 different posts that have been recorded in which he made anti-Sikh remarks, including threatening the deputy leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. And that is not the only point the only time that he's made such comments or putting other politicians on the burner in terms of negativity. He's also said, called out Jagmeet Singh, made some comments online about the murder of Hardeep Singh Nijjar, and this individual turned around and told him to blame his boyfriend, gay boyfriend, Justin Trudeau. So he has insulted the LGBTQ, XYZ community, because there's so many letters that just keep getting added. But in any event, he is representing a provincial riding that is quite diverse, and that is Oshawa. That is basically a suburb, bit of distance there, but just outside of Toronto. It is a very, as I said, diverse, but it's a well-populated area. Oshawa is a very industrial community, and it is just not accepted in that region to have such attitudes. And, well, not that it is anywhere in Canada, but especially in such a big and visual presence and riding like that. Now, he's managed to offend the different groups, but 2 of them in one tweet that they say, and now he is backpedaling, saying that's not who he is, that he apologizes, and so on and so forth. But he has just openly and very publicly supported Modi, supported the extrajudicial killings, not just in Canada, but around the world, and the transnational repression, and the foreign interference. So where are his loyalties? Where is his reporting going to? Is he going to be reporting to the provincial head of his party, or is he going to be reporting back to India with information that shouldn't be getting out there about the Liberal Party? Now, this is the Provincial Liberal Party, which is separate from the Federal Liberal Party, even though they are both Liberal. They are separate and have some of a different mandate in terms of that going forward. Now, they've also called out the Liberal Party, saying that the Conservatives are just trying to dirty the waters, that they're, basically slinging mud back about investigations on land deals and everything else against the Ford government. So it's just a real political campaign that seems to be getting uglier and a lot more mud being thrown both directions these days. It seems to be the status quo for politics in Canada, that it's more about name calling and slinging dirt than it is about the real facts that are facing Canadians in tough times. And let's just look at that fact, is that we need to stick together. Now, I have reported and been from coast to coast to coast. I have touched my toes in the waters of the Atlantic. I have swam in the Pacific. I have run emergency aid and donations by the tens of tons to Fort McMurray in Alberta to help with wildfire relief. I've helped in the Fraser Valley with flood relief. And that is what makes Canada great. The people that I've met from the north in the Arctic Circle right through to the prairies of Saskatchewan, we are a great nation and we have a lot of challenges that we face together. We may argue amongst ourselves, we may bicker, we may have truckers parked outside of Parliament for a month. But at the end of the day, when it comes to protecting our sovereignty, our culture, our history, and our future, we will come together as one. And we've seen that not only with the threat of annexation and being insulted that way, and having the U.S. president calling our prime minister the governor, having Modi stand out and try to spread lies and disinformation through his Govt media. I mean, we all come together in times of trouble, and we come together as one. And I think that's also going to be the bigger lesson for the world, is because I think that regardless as to what's happening between Canada and the U.S. on trade, we still view the Americans as very close allies, as very close friends, and a part of family. And that, I think, is what's going to get us all through. But at the same time, we need to come together in the Western world to fight this disinformation that's coming from the outside. And that includes weeding out the MPs such as this one, the MLAs such as this one, who is a plant of the Govt, the media machine, but also of their political machine, their agencies such as RAW and the RSS. We need to weed them out of our political sphere and stick together. And I think that the U.S. needs to really focus on that. So does European countries such as Great Britain, the United Kingdom, and others. So we need to weed it out. And this just shows that it's not going to be accepted in Canada, Angus.
Indeed, and I think the message from this story to me is just very simple. Social media, and this is a lesson particularly to our young viewers. On social media, never ever put anything down that you won't stand by essentially for the rest of your life, because social media posts are there forever. How many people do we see in the media who suddenly find that past social media posts come to haunt them just when they've built their careers? They come crumbling down because of something they wrote on social media years ago when they were young or whatever. So I think that the message is very simple. Only ever put on social media what you are happy to stand by for the rest of your life. In other words, just be very, very careful what you write. So this story here, I think, is, again, another classic example of somebody who's very outspoken, very opinionated, clearly anti-Sikh. Some of his posts were pretty vile, I have to say. And it is absolutely justifiable that he's now facing the full wrath of the media, that his career is coming tumbling down, his political career is crumbling, essentially because of pretty horrible stuff that he wrote in the past. So again, James, I think this is a story that carries a huge warning example to everybody, really, who's on social media. I'm not on social media, I have to say, for a very good reason. I think for many reasons, I think it's a great thing in some degrees, but it's also very dangerous. And again, whatever you put in social media, it is there forever. The internet, God willing, is there forever. So everything that you put on the internet, photographs, comments, whatever, it is there in perpetuity, and it will stand there until way beyond you leave this earth. So always be fully aware of what you write. And I think this guy, he's rightly facing the full wrath as his career crumbles around him for some pretty vile anti-Sikh posts, James.
Absolutely. And it should be noted, too, that the World Sikh Organization has taken notice of this, of course, and they've called out the Liberal Party, asking why they haven't come out publicly to denounce the comments, to denounce the candidate, and ask how he got vetted to start with and why they would feel that he is an appropriate choice to represent that riding or any other riding. So again, they're looking for the Liberal Party to take swift action on this and make sure that an apology, a sincere apology, is issued, not just a boilerplate letter sent out to the media, Angus.
Indeed, James. So let's move on to my first story. And we often talk about the Sikh coalition in the United States. The Sikh coalition has been a really powerful lobbying organisation. It has stood up for the Sikh community in the US in certainly anything to do with political lobbying, pushing forward the political agenda and just the general issues of the Sikh community in the United States. And they have, just over the last week or two, been heavily involved in contributing to a huge piece of legislation which is going hopefully through the US Senate, and that is the Washington State Bill SB 5436. Now, what on earth is this Bill SB 5436? Well, it is a bill that aims to strengthen protections for houses of worship against harassment, intimidation and blocked access. And of course, it's very relevant to many things that we talk about on a regular basis. And certainly, well, first of all, there's been the potential threat of the ICE raids against Gurdwaras, but in reality, it's actually against, for example, it could be the Hindutva mobs attacking Gurdwaras or certainly intimidating Gurdwaras, etc. But the bill goes wider than that. It's designed to ensure individuals can safely exercise their right to worship without fear. Of course, that is a fundamental tenet of democracy. But also while also providing civil remedies for victims who are targeted within and near houses of worship. And this, of course, isn't just for the Sikh community. It is for all communities as well, Hindus just as much as Sikhs. And I'll just read you. This is actually what the bill is about in more detail. It says the proposed bill is aimed at protecting access to places of religious worship in Washington state. So it is a state bill. It recognises the importance of unimpeded access for the free exercise of religion. It outlines unlawful conduct that interferes with this access. Specifically, it prohibits actions such as physically obstructing individuals entering or leaving a place of worship, trespassing, making repeated unwanted communications, in other words, shouting abuse, and threatening harm to individuals associated with a place of worship. Violations of these provisions are classified as gross misdemeanors. And then it does go on about the remedies, and it includes fines, civil damages, etc., of up to $500 per day for individuals and up to $5,000 per day for places of worship. It also provides injunctive relief. That means it's a legal mechanism to stop people, to force them to be stopped to do acts of violence or whatever, and emphasises that lawful picketing and public information efforts are not restricted by this act. Now that is important because, of course, again, immediately reference the Sikh protests against the Hindu mandirs recently that were reported in Canada, for example, that then led on to those Brampton riots. What it's saying is lawful picketing and public information efforts, so in other words, just peaceful protests are okay, which is a good thing, of course. Again, this treads this fine line in any democracy. There is a right to protest, but there is also criminal law where you step over that line, it becomes a criminal act of violence or threat, whatever. So in other words, it sets out that line a lot clearer. It reduces the grey areas, let's say, in that ability of free speech and stopping it going into a criminal act. So the Sikh Coalition, as always, they provided somebody who was very articulate, somebody well-spoken, to speak up for the Sikh community in this bill. Let me just play you the evidence that they presented at this very hearing. 1 second.
Puneeth, please unmute and begin.
Good morning, Chair Dhingra and members. My name is Puneeth Gaur, and I am the Senior State Policy Manager at the Sikh Coalition. We are the nation's largest Sikh civil rights organization, here today in support of SB 5436. The Sikh community has been an integral part of Washington state for generations, and the Sikh religion teaches equality, service, and justice, and our Gurdwaras, or houses of worship, serve as community spaces that are open to all people, providing free meals and support to anyone in need. Unfortunately, Sikhs are also disproportionately targeted for hate crimes because of our visible articles of faith, which include turbans and unshorn hair. And nationally, the FBI has reported a sharp rise in anti-Sikh hate crimes. And here in Washington, in recent years, we've seen acts of vandalism and harassment at our Gurdwaras, as well as physical assaults on Sikh individuals. With recent federal rollbacks of protections that once kept houses of worship safe from immigration enforcement actions, faith communities like ours are more vulnerable than ever to intimidation and harassment. And we have already seen reports of bad actors impersonating immigration officials or impersonating law enforcement to target and harass minority communities. Regardless of if their fear comes from overzealous immigration enforcement or the potential of violent hate crimes, this bill would help provide solace to many community members by affirming that all Washingtonians deserve to access their places of worship safely and without fear. We strongly believe that protecting the right to worship freely is not a partisan issue, and it is a fundamental civil right. We respectfully urge the committee to pass SB 5436 and help safeguard religious freedoms for all Washingtonians. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So there we go. Well done, Puneet, in that. And James, I think that really speaks for itself. Once again, the power of the Sikh lobby, as always, pressing the politicians to improve society for the better.
Absolutely. And we saw, excuse me, I'm sorry, still adjusting to our new time schedule, folks. So we saw that in Canada where there were temporary orders put in place to protect the Gurdwaras when the India consulate was sending representatives out to do certain polling, certain access to services, and there were protests going on. And of course, they put a 2-block, I believe it was, barrier or perimeter around the Gurdwara in order to secure it from the protests, saying you can pick it, but you got to stay this distance to leave a safe and unintimidating access point. And we've also seen that in Ontario, where they want to do that in several municipalities, given what happened with the different Mandir and Gurdwara battle that happened in Brampton, Ontario last year. So again, it is something that is becoming more commonplace to protect places of worship, Angus.
Indeed. So, we'll keep an eye on that, but it, fingers crossed, it does look like that bill will pass, and I do suspect if it passes in Washington, it will be rolled out. The Sikh Coalition will be pushing it out across other states in the US, so we'll keep an eye on that. But well done to the Sikh Coalition once again, highlighting the key Sikh issues there. Right, let's move on to my second story. And again, this is quite a funny one. This is, of course, we had Modi visiting Trump, which we did report on to great extent, and the discussions that followed that. But of course, in Trump's shadow, if that's even the right description, Elon Musk has stood for, well, certainly since Trump took control of the United States. And he's faced a lot of accusations of all sorts of things. His critics have certainly come out of the woodwork. But one of the interesting ones that's come out is that they're saying, well, what actually is Elon Musk up to? Because he was known to have talks, let's say, with Narendra Modi prior to Trump's own discussions. And the questions have been raised, what on earth were those talks about? What is Elon Musk up to? Well, according to the media, President Trump said he is personally keeping an eye on Elon Musk's conflicts of interest between his private interests at companies like SpaceX and Tesla and DOGE, the Department of Efficiency within the government, of course. There is this potential conflict of interest. We do know that Elon Musk is he the richest man in the world? I think he's certainly very close to that now. But of course, he has this enormously powerful position within the government. So, of course, a lot of critics are saying, well, what actually is he up to then? He could really take advantage of this position for his own personal benefit. I mean, to be honest, he's so wealthy now, does it really matter? But anyway, but the president has said he didn't know if Musk had met India's Prime Minister as a private citizen or as a special government employee. So in other words, what was that meeting about? Was Musk going in as a businessman to meet Mr. Modi, or was he going in as a politician on behalf of the United States? That is a big question, really, because, all the criticisms that we talk about Modi, and Modi comes to the United States clearly looking for commercial deals, it does raise eyebrows. Well, Musk's meeting with Modi happened before Modi actually sat down with President Trump, and it is talked about, it is believed they did talk about space and technology. Now, of course, Musk's two main companies are SpaceX and Tesla. And so operating in these industries, the meeting would ordinarily raise no eyebrows because, of course, both companies do have massive interest, potentially, certainly in the future, in India. And, of course, we talk about the massive market of India. But Musk is currently working as a special government employee. So questions about this overlap between his personal interests and public service continue to mount. Now, he did apparently last year plan to travel to India to meet Modi with the aim of scoping out a new Tesla facility, but that actually really amounted to nothing. But his other interest, and this is where it starts getting a little bit more interesting and actually going off in a tangent that I would like to pursue out of sheer interest, really. And that, again, we talked about social media. This is where it really ignited social media. His other interest, of course, is his satellite company, Starlink. And it is looking for regulatory approval in India. And Trump at the time did actually, when he was asked a few days ago about Musk's discussions with Modi, Trump sort of said, yeah, well, I am, first of all, he wouldn't do it. Second of all, we're not going to let him do anything where there's a conflict of interest. So Trump was a little bit vague about it, I have to say. But clearly, I'm sure behind the scenes, he probably has said to Elon Musk, look, what actually did you talk about? Is there anything I need to know? Anyway, all that aside, again, that's a story probably we'll never know the truth about. But I wanted to bring this story in because related to this, across certainly the right-wing Hindutva media, it did actually talk about this potential relationship between Musk and Modi. And it was actually posted up by one of the army Twitter accounts in northeast India. And they reported only a few days ago, acting on specific intelligence, troops of the Indian Army and the Assam Rifles, that's one of the local regiments up there, under Spear Corps, carried out joint search operations in the hills and valley regions in Churachandpur, Chandel, Imphal East and Kangpokpi in Manipur. In close coordination with the police and other security forces, they recovered 29 weapons, including sniper rifles, automatic weapons, rifles, pistols, mortars, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, a good cache of weaponry, as you can see from the photo here. And of course, they're all standing around very proudly around this recent haul. And we've talked a lot about the violence that's been going on in northeast India, particularly around Manipur. Now, what was particularly interesting, and this is what ignited the Hindutva social media, is in one of these photographs, you'll notice in the top right of this photograph of all this, it's a fairly basic weaponry looking at this. In fact, that rifle looks about 100 years old, but anyway, that's another issue. But certainly compared to a very old rifle, up in the top right is a satellite receiver and a Starlink router. Look at that. So, of course, this really did get the right-wing frothing at the mouth. Deep Shikha on social media says, oh, look, Starlink is being used by terrorists. Hope Elon Musk looks into this and helps control misuse of this technology. Well, yeah, it does, doesn't it? Gosh, as has been argued, Elon Musk is assisting the resistance, the independence movements. Well, that was very quickly scotched at the start. Elon Musk waded in after that very post and said, this is false. Starlink satellite beams are turned off over India. Yes, indeed, as in fact was reported in the earlier report. Elon Musk, he can't be accused of this because, yeah, he doesn't actually have regulatory approval to broadcast or to operate his satellite system over Indian territory. Yeah. In other words, it's fake news, it's nonsense, it's misinformation. Even if that Starlink system was there with the thing, it wouldn't work where it was found in Manipur. It's, again, a complete and utter misinformation. Hindutva jumping on this story, and it actually amounted to nothing. But it does actually, and it does give me the excuse really to mention once again this movement, this independence movement, which is still just about alive in northeast India. It is still happening. But again, it does highlight one of the failures of the Modi regime again. Of course, the violence has been, it's been going on for decades there, and there is a very small independence movement there. And it does cover areas like Assam, Meghalaya, Tripura, Arunachal Pradesh, Mizoram, Manipur and Nagaland. And of course, a lot of this violence has erupted between the various tribes. And again, it's been, caused a lot by the BJP governance, or you could say lack of governance. But it's the Kuki and Maitai tribes particularly who's part of this. There is a big resistance movement, and I actually just want to give you just a flavour of how complex this is. In part of the Maitai, the Maitais are the Hindu majority. There's 51% population majority are Maitais. Some of the militant groups include the United National Liberation Front, the People's Liberation Army, the People's Revolutionary Party of Kanglepak, and there's about 20 others. The Kuki Christians, who are the 14% minority, they include the Kuki National Army, the Kuki National Front, the Kuki Liberation Army, the Kuki National Front of Kukiland, the Kuki Revolutionary Army, the United Old Kuki Liberation Army, the United Comrade Revolutionary Army, blah, blah, blah. Another 20 other militant factions. And then there's the Nagas, the Zomis, who've got their own militant factions. In other words, this place is an absolute mess to govern. And Narendra Modi he's given special status to the minorities, but is also they were given a special status to protect their minority status. But Narendra Modi has actually since then ridden roughshod over this, and he's now allowed the Hindu Maitais. He's allowed them to take governmental roles, to take roles again in these upper caste roles, which has really upset a lot of the minority communities who said, look, we need representation in these, otherwise our voices are just going to get lost. Again, it's riding roughshod over the local democratic process that was set actually out constitutionally and has since been set out on a legal basis ever since then to protect the minorities. But of course, the violence has erupted because Modi's government has ridden over all this. And ever since the violence has happened, Modi has done pretty much nothing to do about it. It took him 3 months last year after the violence exploded. It took him 3 months to even speak publicly about it. So again, another failure. But again, it's all tied into this story, James. It's a bit of a strange thread to sort of pursue that. But well, over to you for any of your comments on that one, James.
Well, I think it's interesting. And personally, I mean, 29 weapons, when you look at what they had laid out there, I don't find that impressive. I don't see that as something to brag about when you look at the amount of resources, the military personnel, the soldiers. I mean, there's just so much there. So that really, in a way, points to how difficult the job is there, because they have the force, they have, the mountains and all of the different regions where these fighters are hiding. And if they can use that technology, whether it's the Starlink satellite or whatever, to reprogram it to maybe work with a different satellite, then again, it's not Tesla's fault that way. The same accusations were made against Tesla when it came to Russia using the technology. Now, whether or not they can reprogram it, repurpose it, that's a different story. But again, it is not impressive to me for them to find this small cache of weapons. And really, I mean, they're not talking about big arrests. They're not talking about that. They're talking about locating these weapons on some kind of a, specific intelligence action. So I think that we need to see more in terms of the crackdown on the soldiers as well, because I see violent reports of violence coming from both sides, the soldiers as well as the insurgents and the rebels that are out in those areas, Angus. And again, if there was more autonomy to the regions to be able to control and focus on the specific issues facing their province, then I think that they would have a lot more success instead of everything being run roughshod by Modi from New Delhi, where he doesn't know the nuances specifically of each community or each state And then with that, he's also not able to move the government and the reaction in a timely manner that they could if it was state run. And I think that's really an important point, is that he is trying to micromanage everything, and it's actually ending up with the negative result that nothing's getting done.
Indeed, and I think we talk about Khalistan and the dominoes falling. There is an independence movement that still just does exist in this area. It's been brutally repressed, as of course the Punjab was back in the 80s and 90s. Where the Khalistan movement was brutally suppressed just through sheer utter brute force, brutality, murder, let's call it what it was. And they've done pretty much the same in this area. And so the independence movement is literally, it's quite small now, and people are cowed into fear. This isn't democracy in action. People are literally being cowed into fear, into stopping supporting the independence movement, because they're just too scared to do so. And apparently I think it is restricted now just to almost a corner of 3 states. I think it's Tripura, Arunachal Pradesh and Manipur. That's where they are holding out, but it is still there, and this is one of those dominoes eventually that is likely to fall when India does finally break apart, as certainly Gurdwaras Singh Panini does seem to predict. But anyway, let's move on, James. In the interest of time, let's move on to our comments section. Thank you to all our commenters and our wonderful audience for your comments which you've been pouring in. As always, fascinating comments, all very much appreciated. We do read every single one. First one to kick us off with comes from Mohandan Noir. This is, I guess, after the Invictus Games. Is that Markle's husband? Yes, it was. I don't know if this was meant as a slightly joke comment or a genuine question. Is that Markle's husband? Yes, it was. It was Prince Harry, I have to say, who stood up and did a magnificent speech. And well, let's not drag Meghan Markle into this story, James. But yeah, I think we're both pretty impressed by Prince Harry in that Games.
Yes, Prince Harry, yes.
Yes, let's
I'll
leave it
the
at
Markle
that.
part out of it. Yes, Prince Harry I was very proud of.
Yeah, so swiftly moving on. Makan Lal says, Modi's superpower. His superpower is travelling around the world at India's public expense. He's got a master degree in polishing shoes and making tea for supper countries. Yes, this actually reflects, I see a lot of criticism, obviously, about Narendra Modi. And I think this does really highlight, I think it summarises in one or a couple of sentences what people say about Narendra Modi. He's travelling around the world at public taxpayers' expense, shaking hands, being feted by the world leaders, but actually he's got a master degree in polishing shoes and making tea. And I think a lot of Indians do actually view him almost as that. He's going out with a begging bowl in a slightly embarrassing fashion. I have to say, just from a slightly partisan perspective, the same criticism is currently being laid at Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister's door. The same criticism saying, you're travelling around the world at our taxpayers' expense. For what, really? I think what really matters is the problems we've got at home, not overseas. And I think Indians have probably got the same criticism about Narendra Modi, James.
Oh, and we've got the same criticisms here in Canada. The U.S. has the same criticisms. I mean, it's all about international relations, and today that's even more important than ever. But what can be cut back on the travel by doing Skype calls and that? Sometimes you need to be face-to-face and actually read body language that you may not get off of a conference call or a video call. But again, yeah, it is a lot of waste. And, but as for Modi making tea, I definitely will skip that because I don't know what he's going to put in our tea, Angus.
Yes, and if he ever offers us anything to eat or drink, I suggest we politely turn it down. Sukhwant, and actually, talking about that, Sukhwant's comment, bye-bye Hindu terror chief. Yes, of course, he was sent packing from America, but it's the word terror chief. I think this is the key point of this, actually, I wanted to raise. Because India, Narendra Modi and the BJP's constant accusation against the Khalistan movement, you're all a bunch of terrorists. Well, as we often point out on a very regular basis, who actually is creating the terror here? Who actually are responsible for terrorist acts? I don't see any Khalistanis responsible for any terrorist acts. If I'm incorrect, I invite anybody in our audience to point out any act of terrorism in recent times by the Khalistan movement. I'll be fascinated to know it because I certainly haven't seen it, but I can certainly point to you, as I do on a regular basis, many actual genuine acts of terror by Hindutva, by the Indian government. And of course, we're talking transnational oppression, James, plain and simple.
Absolutely, and I think that's another part of the laws that are being brought into Washington State is to help give that another level of protection to all places of worship, because there has been that type of activity. But again, as you said, we don't hear any of that coming from the Sikh side of things. We hear about it from the Hindutva and the nationalists and extremists, and for different religions, but definitely not from the Sikhs, in this regard.
Indeed, India's Commander-in-Chief of Terror sent packing, according to Sukhwant. And free spirit. Oh, here's a rabbit hole I really don't want to go down, but it was worth a mention, James. We talked Vinnie Chorn's comment about the death toll. He was a bit flippant about the death toll of the genocide. But, as Free Spirit says, asking about the death toll due to COVID, the Indian government is downplaying this number by a factor of at least tenfold. Well, I don't know. COVID was a strange old thing. And I'll tell you one thing about the whole COVID pandemic was the truth was that first casualty of COVID, because you try and find some genuine truth, whichever side of the argument you sit on. I'll be quite plain. I totally was very suspicious about the whole COVID thing. And even here in the UK, certainly the statistics about COVID were very, very questionable. And there was a very strong movement here in the UK of free thinkers, I like to call them, people who were totally dismissive of the government figures because weirdly flu vanished. Normal winter flu, according to the government statistics, vanished. We literally had no cases of flu over that winter, yet we had however many 100,000 or millions of cases of COVID. In other words, all very suspicious, James. I don't know how it was in Canada, but certainly here in the UK and clearly in India, the truth was that first casualty.
Well, and I think that the trucker convoy really demonstrated how it looked in Canada. And to take that a step further, I mean, I think that the numbers worldwide were manipulated, not just here in Canada. I think that, it's just like the smoking statistics. If you get hit by a truck going across the street to the convenience store to get cigarettes, the cigarettes killed you. So, it is just that way that the numbers work. When it comes to the controls and the masking and everything else, I won't get into that because, again, it was something that we had never seen before on such a global scale. I sure as hell wouldn't want to be anywhere near having to make decisions for a group of people when it came to any type of pandemic. So I really think that, there was a lot of misinformation about numbers. There was intentional and unintentional, I think, miscalculations.
Yeah, and what I can tell you is that trust in the medical profession plummeted and still to this day remains down because of the nonsense, the lies that were peddled by, I would say, more the government than the medical profession, but the medical profession was certainly complicit in a lot of the misinformation that was spread by the governments about COVID. But I don't want to go down that road. We could talk probably for a whole show on that one, much as I would love to, because I do feel very passionately about how the population were lied to in that whole pandemic. But anyway, let's move on, James, before we get dragged down that rabbit hole. Gurdwaras Singh Grewal says India actually promotes the caste system by allocating quotas to government jobs, these high-level jobs based on caste. It should be like Western countries where benefits are based on financial needs of individuals, not on surname. Again, we bring back the whole caste system. And clearly in India, the higher level jobs are almost automatically given to members of the higher caste, and lower caste just don't even get a look in. It's never based on merit. And constitutionally, and I do refer back to some of my old podcasts I did with Colonel Singh, actually, where we went through the Constitution really closely. And on the face of it, the Constitution banishes the caste system. Actually, in reality, when you go through it, and do watch my podcast with Colonel Singh, he points out, no, it doesn't. It's very cleverly worded. It doesn't. On the face of it, it bans the caste system. But in reality, it gives special status to certain lower caste demographics. In other words, it actually embeds into the Constitution the caste system. It's very devious. In other words, the caste system is absolutely alive and well in India and unfortunately spreading across the diaspora. It is an evil that we often talk about, James, and it's not going away soon by the looks of it. This is why Sikhs have rejected the whole system. They see it for what it is.
Absolutely. And let's face it, I mean, even though they say the caste system is gone, it's not there, we've eliminated it, it's just there by a different name at the very least, Angus.
Indeed, indeed. Pam Athwell says, a very good programme. Well, thank you for your comment. And this goes back to the story we did about the comment about the Widows' Colony. And you reckon it's actually been renamed maybe to hide the truth and destroy Sikh history. Well, that wouldn't surprise us, of course. We do know this is a typical tactic of the Indian government. I have to say, I did look for this new name and I couldn't find it. I could only see references to the name I mentioned at the time. But let us know if you can find that new name, because I did a quick search and I couldn't find any new reference to it, other than it seems to universally be known as the Widows' Colony. So, yeah, do let us know on that. And then, Jez, yes, we did a tribute to Deep Sidhu and the very suspicious death of the Khalistan supporter and the Khalistan campaigner Deep Sidhu. Thank you to Sandeep Singh, Ravinder Chima, Balwinder Jasal, for your comments about Deep Sidhu. Clearly a very deeply loved and deeply missed gentleman, James.
Absolutely, and I think that goes far and wide, Angus. I don't know where these viewers are joining us from, but I know that it is probably many nations that the diaspora feels that loss.
Indeed. And Free Spirit, one of our biggest contributors recently has been Danny, and I've covered a couple of his fascinating comments recently. And Free Spirit has actually waded in here to say, look, these comments, he's acting as a bit of a mischief to encourage ill feelings between Khalistanis and Pakistanis. This is an attempt to misdirect the Khalistan. And Danny did come back, and it says 4 replies there, and I deliberately put that in there so you could see it. Danny did come back very forcefully, I have to say, with some very, very lengthy replies explaining, and we need a whole show to talk about what he actually responded. But I would say thank you to Danny for your comments. They're actually very, very reasoned arguments, what you're saying. But I think the point here really is thank you to all of you who've contributed on this, because it's been a very intelligent discussion. I don't know if this was deliberately designed to divide our audience and say, look, it's this argument between the Punjab Pakistan side, the Punjab India side. What I would say is it just points to, James, how dangerous and how maybe ill thought out the whole partition was. Dividing Punjab down the middle has created a legacy that even today, 70 plus years later, we are still essentially arguing over this issue. That the Sikh community was divided and then caused that mass exodus that ended up with millions of people literally dying. It was a genocide at the time. So many people died because of that wretched partition that just divided Punjab down the middle. It was a terrible time, and here we are all these years later still arguing the legacy of that partition.
Yeah, the reparations need to be put in place because, again, it was, completely, totally overlooked in terms of giving land back to the Sikh Empire. And that was just wrong on so many levels. And then to take it with rubbing salt in the wound and adding injury to insult, India just totally neglected and reneged on their promises and commitments to the Sikh people. And that was, that's where we find ourselves today, still battling over it. And I just mean we as in the world looking at it and trying to figure out what to do. And, all of the brave people who are fighting for Khalistan through the referendum and all other methods. I mean, look at the risks that they are going through to try and make it right for their people.
Indeed, and unfortunately, I have to blame the British for a lot of that problem. They were behind. Obviously, they arbitrarily drew that dividing line in 1947. Obviously, under a lot of time pressure, they had to do it quickly. But I don't think they even foresaw the dreadful legacy that would leave in the region. But anyway. And the final comment of the day goes to Gurdwaras Singh, who says, "Hi James." Well, hello to you. And hi to Angus. "Your programme is full of knowledge." Oh, I'm glad you think so. But now, many Punjabi-speaking people cannot understand English, so it'd be helpful if we could put translated, subtitles in Punjabi. So they can appreciate our hard work. We'd be very grateful for this. Thanks. Keep up the hard work. Well, thank you for your comment. I don't know, James. This requires something very technical and something way beyond certainly my expertise, but maybe amongst a team somewhere we can work out how to do this. I don't know if we can have real-time or even post-processed Punjabi subtitles on the videos.
There are programs out there, but the problem that we're having to address this issue is that the subtitles that the AI is creating for us just in English alone are very sketchy at best. So for us not understanding Punjabi or other languages, it would be very difficult for us to do any type of quality control to make sure that there's nothing offensive accidentally created by the AI algorithms in the translation program. So that may be something down the road, but at this point I think that unfortunately that is where it's at. But definitely we will keep an eye out because AI is advancing so rapidly. We will definitely keep an eye out. And I've actually been playing with some different translation programs to see how they work, but they're just not quite there yet.
Indeed. So thank you for that suggestion, Gurdwaras Singh. Much appreciated. We will look into it, but at this stage, maybe a little step too far, but who's to say we might be able to do that in the future. Fingers crossed. But unfortunately, we must leave perspectives for another day. So please don't forget to keep those comments coming in. Thank you for all the comments that you have poured in beneath our videos. They are very much appreciated. We do read every single one, and they always create some fascinating discussions, certainly in the comments and indeed on the show. So thank you for those. Don't forget you can, of course, message us directly at message@satledgetv.com on anything that you'd like to bring to our attention directly that you don't want to put in the public domain. But in the meantime, that is it, excuse me, for another week. Thank you so much for watching Perspectives. It is a goodbye from me, and it is also a goodbye from James.
Stay safe, everyone.
You have, of course, been watching Perspectives. We will see you next time.